Welcome to the Fire and Earth podcast with your hosts, Jason Mefford and Kathy Groover. Fire and Earth, giving you the keys to unlock your limitless potential.
Welcome to another episode of the Fire and Earth podcast. I'm your co-host, Jason Mefford.
And I am Kathy Groover, and we're going to have a fascinating conversation today about expectations and bias. And, I'm sure this has happened to you, Jason, where, you have maybe a meeting with somebody, or, you're heading out on a blind date, or, whatever the situation is, and you're like, oh, this is going to suck. This is going to be terrible. It's never going to go right. And then weirdly, that's exactly what happens.
Yeah, it just never goes right. It's a date from hell or whatever else that comes out, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, we often program kind of what our future holds, and our brain looks for things that it's familiar with. So if we're constantly convincing ourselves that something's going to be awful, something's going to be terrible, something's going to go wrong, I'm never going to get this, well, your brain goes, oh, okay, and it tries to figure out ways to make that happen. So today we're going to talk about not only a little bit of that sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, but also the bias and how we go into certain situations.
Yeah, because I know sometimes there's times, because we were talking about before we hit record, one of the examples, that you had with a client where, I have the same kinds of things happen where sometimes, we'll be wanting to see things or have the universe communicate to us. And if we have an expectation about what we want that to be, we will start to see things our way in the different signs that are given to us. And so sometimes, again, because people are kind of like, well, hold it, is that something from the universe, or is that just me? Right. And sometimes you don't know until it's over. But it's an interesting discussion to kind of have, right? Because I think, unfortunately, a lot of times we do find ourselves in that situation where we're trying to find things to confirm what we want to do. But while we're doing that, we're thinking that we're receiving some kind of inspiration.
Right.
But we're
Absolutely
not. We're just convincing ourselves to do something that we want to do.
Well, and isn't it confirmation bias, right? Where it's like, what is it? Is it I know it's the reticular activating system, but like we buy a brand new car and then suddenly everybody's driving that blue Mazda. Well, they've been there the whole time, but it's just now in our consciousness because we have one. And we're noticing them more because it's something that we've programmed to notice. So no, I mean, I have a client who, and I haven't seen her for years, but she had a pendulum, right? She would swing a pendulum, and if it went this way, it was yes, and if it went that way, it was no. And I swear to God, she wouldn't wipe her ass in the morning before she asked the pendulum if that's what she was supposed to do. And like she relied so heavily on this external sort of esoteric thing, or whether it's muscle testing, or whether it's throwing tarot cards or I Ching or whatever it is. But it's hard to read that stuff yourself because you have that bias of what you want to happen. And if you're desperate to meet a partner, every card you throw, oh, look, it's a tall, dark stranger. Oh, look, it's going to happen in 2 months. Oh, we confirm those things with ourselves because that's what we want to happen. So even if we swear we're completely negative about, completely neutral about it. I'm sorry, the cat is biting me. Okay. Thank you, Alistair, for confirming my bias. We put our expectation on that fortune telling device. So you have to be really careful with stuff like that. Or your fortune says, prosperity and abundance will come to you and you find a dime that day on the street. Well, you just fulfilled that prophecy. Or are we making that fit because that's what we wanted to see? It's such a complicated thing.
Well, and I think it's interesting because to me, one of the big things with this is what I call giving up our personal power. Right, is that ultimately we are the ones who are responsible. We are the ones who make the choice.
Yeah,
we are the ones who get to choose to co-create whatever it is that we want. Right.
Yep.
And what I see a lot of people do, and again, there's nothing wrong with using tarot cards or any other kinds of cards. There's nothing wrong with using a pendulum. There's nothing wrong with muscle testing. But are you giving over your personal power to those things or to another individual, right? Because that happens a lot of times too, right? Is I might come to Kathy as my friend and I'd say, Kathy, here's what's going on. What do you think?
Yeah.
Well, Kathy's going to give me her opinion. right? Well, if I
From
were
my
you,
perspective,
from your
with my
perspective,
biases. Yep.
yep. If I were you, I would do blah, 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 right? Well, okay, I might look at that and say, Kathy, I love you, but I don't agree with you.
Mhm.
Or well, that makes sense, right? Or maybe it triggers something else to help me make the decision, but
Yep.
am I going to make the decision based on what is right for me and what I choose, or am I only going to do it because Kathy suggested it? And those
Yeah.
are two very different things, right? And so the same thing, like you said, I've seen people a lot of times with cards and with astrology and some other things like that they place. Those are all things to give us clues, to point us in direction,
Yes.
to give us some data points. But if you're making your decisions solely based on what you're reading into it, you're not necessarily receiving the guidance from the universe.
Right.
So
And
so
also,
so like you said, if you want a partner and you throw a card that's a tall, dark stranger, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna find my true love in the next 2 weeks. No, maybe it's a tall, dark stranger that's gonna do something different for you. Or
right.
maybe that doesn't mean anything
Or
about it.
then you meet the short blonde and you're like, nah, can't be him, and it's like you just lost the opportunity because you were reading into something that was misinterpreting. And also going back to the tarot card thing, because I read tarot cards and believe in them or not, whatever. Some people think they're a bunch of crap. That's fine. Don't have them read. But they are a glimpse of that moment in time if nothing else changes. So if you decide to divert off the freeway, you're going to have a different outcome. If you decide to not take that job, you're going to have a different outcome. Tarot cards are a glimpse in time as an optional future if things stay the same on that path. And I think a lot of people don't recognize that. Also, please don't read your own tarot cards, because it's all interpretation. So you're going to put your bias on that. You can't read tarot cards unbiased for yourself. This is why there's certain card decks that I have that, you pick a card and there's a very specific story kind of description that goes along with it. There's no interpretation for that, so if you've got to read your own cards, do one that you don't have to try to interpret, or go to somebody who's an expert in that. But also remember that you have free will and there's a free choice along with that. And these things are going to, these outcomes are going to change if you change any of the components of that process.
Well, that was the point that I was going to make. Again, as far as you being the one responsible, you being the one who's creating, if you don't like that glimpse in time, it's like, okay, what am I going to do different? Because that's not what I want. That's not the outcome I want to create. So what am I going to do different? Right. As opposed to just saying, oh my gosh, that's going to happen. Blah, 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 blah. Right. It's like, no, take your power, be the person who creates the future that you want, instead of being so influenced and overcome with whatever it might be. Like you said, whether it's a pendulum, whether it's cards, whether it's your friend that you're getting advice from. Do you have a bullshit meter in your brain, right? Because so many people in this world just accept at face value what they're told. What they're supposed to do, how they're supposed to look, what they're supposed to say, what they can't say, opinions they're supposed to have, right? You're supposed to get married, have your white picket fence house and your 2.7 kids, right? And earn $85,000 a year. I don't know, whatever, right? Well, do you just accept things like that at face value? Or are you the kind of person that's like, you know what, I don't really agree with that. I don't believe that. I'm going to go a different way. Right. Because that's all part of our process here as well.
Right. And sometimes it can be a challenge to turn off that noise from everybody else. Right. It's like you're on the game show and it's, do you take your money and walk, or do you keep going on and risk everything for more? And there's that audience screaming at you to do stuff. And inevitably half is saying, take it and go. And the other half is saying, go, go, go. How do you eliminate that noise to figure out what you really want? And that can be so hard sometimes because those voices are so loud. And so often they're in our head from our past, right? Mom said I should do this. My church said I should do this. My political party says I should do this. We get all this outside influence, and sometimes it's really hard to turn that noise off to know what is the right step. So take your time, be responsive rather than reactive, right? Figure out what, and this is where I love, and because I'm such a visual kinesthetic, I love writing stuff down because that helps clarify things for me. But don't be a slave to what everybody else wants of you, or what the tarot cards say, or what the pendulum is telling you. Think about your options and ponder what you really want. What do you want, not what everybody around you thinks you should want.
Well, no, that's one thing that I've started to do more of as well. So especially when you're talking to other people, right? Because when you're with somebody else, you're feeling their energy as well, right? And depending on how charismatic they are, depending on how manipulative or and again, manipulative is a bad word, or how much influence they have, right? A lot of times we might try to make a decision being in that energy. And like you said, that's when we have that external noise all around us. And so what I do is I collect data from different places, right? Like I might look at some cards. I might see, I mean, the other day I saw a squirrel run across our fence, which is abnormal. We have squirrels in the area, but they don't typically run across our fence. Interesting data point, right? And then I was out running an errand later, and guess what ran out in front of me on the street, and I had to pretty much slam on the brakes not to hit it, a squirrel. So now I have 2 data points about squirrel, right? And it's like, okay, there's something about squirrel medicine that I need to hear.
Yeah.
So, right. So then I have to sit with that, or recapitulate on that, and maybe some other things that are going on, or maybe a question that I have, and sit down and kind of go through it, but not with the intention of, I want squirrel to mean this thing to me.
Exactly.
Right. I have this expectation that it's going to mean I'm going to, make $1 million tomorrow. Right. I can't sit with it with that expectation, because if I do, then that's just my ego.
Right.
That's just me convincing myself of something that I think I want to do.
Right.
But if instead I'm like, oh, well, isn't that interesting? I wonder what that could mean.
Curiosity.
What does that mean to me? Moving into that curiosity. And then I kind of go through and I ask myself different questions. Right. And it's similar to muscle testing, but
yeah,
I ask myself questions in certain ways, and I listen to my body. Where am I feeling different things in my body when I ask myself certain questions? And sometimes the answer is like, boom. Right? I mean, it's pretty powerful. Other times it's kind of, a little vague, a little soft, right? And so I might kind of ask myself the same question several times. I might ask it in different ways. And when I start to see the pattern, right? When I start to see the pattern, and I'm real with myself about what do I really want, then it becomes clear, right? But you have to do that work. You have to, this morning I threw the tall, dark stranger card. That's interesting. And today I saw a squirrel, and today I had this random thought pop into my head, right? It's like, okay, well, take those pieces in your silence and think about what if those things have anything to do with each other and what it is, but without placing the expectation.
Right.
And so again, that's the mindfulness, right? Being in the present moment without expectation, without judgment. Right.
And this is such a hard conversation, because I had a friend years back who she believed just period in chaos, period. That was it. There's no meaning to any of it. You saw squirrels because they're squirrels. And our human brain, desperately trying to make sense of chaos, puts meaning on these things that have zero meaning. So to her, if she was here, Anita was her name, murder mystery friend, she was hilarious, but she just had this philosophy of, look, she goes, of course you can look back and see patterns. That's what our brain does. Just the same way we see faces in things, right? We can see faces in the little plug, and we can see faces in, our brain is here to make meaning out of chaos. And so maybe those 3 squirrels you saw, you just saw 3 fucking squirrels. It could mean nothing. And that would be her philosophy of, we try to find those patterns, and our brain can't stand to have those open loops. So it's going to try to create connection between things where there's zero connection. So that's just a completely different philosophy on that of, but I've done the same thing. We have squirrels in our yard. So to me, squirrels aren't like a sign for me, but there are other animals where when they appear repeatedly, I know deep inside that's an indication that something is shifting, that something's changing. Or what patterns I see in clouds, or, it's like sometimes you go, okay, this is the 3rd dragon I've seen this week. That's interesting. I wonder what that's about, and just getting curious about it, not necessarily putting meaning on it, but just noticing and going, huh, that's different. Why do I keep seeing spiders everywhere? Or, whatever it is.
Well, yeah, and it's that curiosity, staying in that curious space.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not judging, you're not putting expectations on it, and looking for those things that are out of the ordinary or that are different, right? Because it's like, yeah, there's squirrels in the area here. I mean, we live next to a huge park, right? There's squirrels all over the place, but we're about a mile away, and we normally don't get squirrels in our yard.
Yeah.
Right. So, or the same thing, like, there's possums in the area.
Mm-hmm.
And if all of a sudden, like 3 or 4 days in a row, I'm seeing a possum walk across my fence at night, it's like there's something probably there, right? And can I listen? Can I hear what it is, instead of saying, oh, well, possum means this, right? And again, just trying to find out what it is, but then I have to decide myself what I'm going to do about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because again, I could tell you, hey, Kathy, I saw a possum on my fence last night, or I had this dream. Tell me what my dream means. Sorry, Kathy, I love you, but you can't tell me what my dream meant. You can tell me how you would interpret it.
Mm-hmm.
You could ask me questions about it.
Yep.
But the only one who can really interpret the dream and know what it means for me is me.
Yep. Can I give you an example?
Yeah.
So I used to go to silent retreats at Lake Shrine, which is the self-realization fellowship down in Los Angeles on Sunset, right before PCH. Paramahansa Yogananda. I love his teachings. I love his philosophy. And so I would go on these silent retreats. And one of the silent retreats I went on, I think it was the second one, one of the exercises that I did is you take 2 minutes and you write down 50 things that you want to accomplish. Now, give me a time limit, give me a list to write. I'm the happiest girl in the world. So I set the timer, and I'm writing, and I'm writing, and I'm writing, and I'm writing, and I'm writing. And then you kind of go, wait, you start to run out of things. Right. And one of the things that popped up that I didn't even know I wanted, just kind of came out of this list, was get my previously self-published books traditionally published. Had never crossed my mind, didn't know it was a thing I wanted, but it popped out on this list. And I went, oh, interesting. I should actually start to explore that. That would be really, so I kind of started to think about that. I started to write more about that. Well, the logo of Lake Shrine is a lotus flower. And during the retreat, I went down to the gift shop and I bought this beautiful lotus flower sticker that I was going to put in a water bottle. And then I bought this little lotus flower like incense holder. And I just kind of suddenly went, wow, I'm just really feeling an affinity with these lotus flowers. Fast forward, I do all this research. I start to submit stuff to publishers saying, hey, this is what I'd like to do. Most people aren't going to republish books unless they were really, really successful. One publisher gets in touch with me. They love my books. They love my enthusiasm. They love my social media. They this, that. I signed the contract. They published my books. Lotus Press is who ended up taking my books.
Ding, 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 ding.
Now, is that my brain going, oh, lotus flower and the lotus, and that's where I wrote down that I wanted to do that? Now Lotus Press, is my brain making order out of chaos, or was that a sign that Lotus Press was the one that is going to, it's like, it could go either way. It could honestly go either way. But that's my very concrete example of patterns and signs and all that sort of stuff.
And back to, some of the stuff that we've talked about with stories before, right? Is it's like, you can choose to believe either of those stories, and whatever you choose to believe is fine, right? Mm-hmm. I choose to believe that that was universal, intervention
Yep.
in helping you to unlock something within yourself that you didn't even realize, right? Because I think that's one thing that as humans that are kind of defined in this little box that we're in here, it's hard to see all of the possibilities because we're limited to only the structures that we know or what we're in.
Mhm.
And so sometimes like that, when something comes through you and you're like, that's kind of a random thought. I never would have thought of that. Pay attention, right?
Yeah.
Because that's probably one of those things where it is the universe coming through. And then, like you said, the lotuses and then Lotus Publishing and, all these different things. I choose to believe that it's the universe helping me. And the more that I withhold judgment, I stay in curiosity, I do my work, right?
Yes.
Because you have to do your work.
Ding, ding, ding. Absolutely. And I think so often we forget that.
Yeah. So I have to go sit with myself. I have to, analyze is maybe too hard of a word because I'm really not trying to analytically look at it.
Yeah.
But can I feel into it?
Yeah.
Of what needs to be, and then can I make the choice and do the things and be the kind of person that needs to make that happen?
Yeah.
And so I choose to believe that because I feel that in myself.
Yep.
People like your friend that think everything is chaos, that's fine. If she wants to think that way, that's fine. I prefer to have a life where I feel like I am loved and supported, instead of just believing everything is chaos and random.
Yeah.
Because most of the time when people throw that out there, it's only because they're just looking at too small of a data set. There is no chaos. And we've even kind of seen that from chaos theory. When you expand your vision, there is nothing that is chaotic. Everything ends up becoming a pattern over time. It's just because you're too narrowly focused on this small little bandwidth that appears to be chaotic. But over time, everything is kind of planned. Everything is a cycle. Everything is a season. And we've talked about that before, right?
Yep.
Is your perception that you're looking over is just not long enough, and that's why you believe that.
Yeah.
Right? Or even the same thing, I mean, with believing in God, right? And it's like people say, well, Jason, do you believe in God? Well, I kind of do what Spinoza and Einstein said. It's just like, well, it depends on how you define God.
Right.
Is it some bearded white man up in the sky? No, I don't really believe in that in the way that dogmatic religion teaches of what God is. But do I believe in God? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, it's kind of but in a different way than most people probably believe.
Yep.
Right. And it works for me.
Yep.
And it's what feels right for me. And it's what I've sat with. And it's what I know. So it works for me.
Yep.
Might not work for Kathy, might not work for you. Doesn't matter.
And that's all that matters is
If
it works for you.
Me, right?
Yep.
Because that's the end of the point too, right? That we were kind of talking about at the beginning is, are you going to be the one who takes your personal power and makes a choice that's right for you, right? Because the decision for me might be different than the decision Kathy would make.
Absolutely.
There's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with Kathy's decision.
Yep.
Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with my decision, right? That's the best one for me.
Yep. At this time.
At the time, there might be a different one that Kathy would choose. That's fine.
Yep.
Right? We all have to live our lives. We all have to do what's best for us, right? And we have to allow other people to do that for themselves too. Absolutely.
Yes. There's an empowerment in that for sure. Yeah. Cool. I love that we never know where these are going to go and end up being so wise. So wise. Wow. All right. Well, everybody go out and take back your personal power and make good choices, and pay attention to the squirrels.
Pay attention to those squirrels.
Yeah.
Those things that are a little out of the ordinary, because there just might be a message there for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. All right. I'm Kathy Groover. I can be reached at kathygruver.com.
And I'm Jason Mefford. I can be reached at jasonmefford.com. So go out, have a great week. We'll see you on the next episode of the Fire and Earth Podcast. See ya.
See ya.